I am hopping in here to share with you something I am so excited to be a part of. The Thriving Mom Summit is coming from October 18th to October 31st. This is a free 14-day online summit designed to help overwhelmed moms learn the tools and strategies for ditching daily chaos and achieving more peace, priority-based productivity, and purpose. It's ideal for moms with kids under age 10 who are interested in systems and routines to make mom life easier, and tips and tools to simplify their life with topics including parenting, budgeting, clutter, pursuing passions, goal setting, self-care, and more, including my session on flexible meal planning. The goal of the summit is to give moms more peaceful hearts, minds, and homes with the confidence to implement strategies to ditch daily chaos. Registration is 100% free, so what are you waiting for? To sign up, head to thrivingmomsummit.com, and I'll put the link to that in the show notes, but it's thrivingmomsummit.com. I can't wait to see you there.
I love to develop recipes and I love to cook, but building and creating a from scratch dinner every single night was not sustainable for me. I was burnt out, food boredom, and I wound up saying, oh, forget it. I can't do this tonight. So let's just order takeout. And then I have food in my pantry and my refrigerator though, that I need to use up. And so it was not a sustainable system. And so I needed to come up with a better way. Getting a delicious dinner on the table should not have to be that difficult.
Living a healthy, balanced life is no small feat, especially when you're a mom. With meals to cook, laundry to load, work to do, and humans to raise, it can be easy to feel like we're in an on-again, off-again relationship with healthy living. But it doesn't have to feel this way. I believe living a healthy life has become way too complicated. What we need isn't a new plan or program telling us what to eat or how to live. We need simple, uncomplicated routines and information that's going to help us live our best, most beautiful life without rules and restrictions. Join me, Kristin Dovbniak, holistic health coach, certified intuitive eating counselor, and mama of two, for weekly conversations on what it means to live a healthy, balanced life, uncomplicate eating, and simplify in every area of mom life. Hey friends, welcome back to the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast. Chris here, and I have another awesome guest interview for all of you today. I'm sure many of you already know today's guest. If you are in the food world at all when it comes to wanting to eat meals that are delicious and also healthy, today's guest has got you. Today we are going to talk all about easier ways for getting dinner on the table with Cassy Joy Garcia. We had such a fun conversation. You guys already know that I'm a huge fan of meal prep, and Cassy Joy has a really unique method of prepping meals ahead of time, but not in the way that you might think. Instead of having this big, long prep day at the beginning of the week, which many of you know, I'm all about keeping it as simple as possible. So it's about whatever works for you. She encourages you to cook once and eat all week. And she has a brand new book out called Cook Once Dinner Fix, all about, you guessed it, dinners. And as busy mamas as most of us are, I know that we could all use some hacks for getting dinner on the table faster. So she shares her Cook Once method. She shares hacks on how we can get dinner on the table faster. And she has some really good ideas, some that I am going to implement myself. She also shares some flavor hacks for things that she keeps on hand to make meals delicious without extra effort. She talked about some of her favorite recipes from the book, some of her family's favorite recipes. We talked a ton about food. She gave a ton of examples of how you can actually make this happen in real life. And she was just a joy to talk to. So much fun. We had such a good time geeking out about food. And so for those of you who don't yet know, Cassy Joy Garcia is the best-selling author of Cook Once Dinner Fix, Cook Cook Once, Eat All Week, and Fed and Fit, as well as the creative force behind the popular food blog Fed and Fit. Eager to share her healthy living secrets with the world, she started Fed and Fit in 2011. They just celebrated 10 years. Since then, she became a holistic nutrition consultant and transitioned her personal blog into a tremendously supportive and nimble online wellness editorial backed by a small but mighty team of writers, researchers, and editors. After realizing that her own struggles to get a healthy homemade dinner on the table overlapped with the same struggles experienced by her readers, she decided there must be a better way. The Cook Once method was born, and it has revolutionized how people cook. She lives in San Antonio, Texas, with her husband and 2, almost 3 children, and I know you guys are going to love this conversation. There is a ton of practical tips for you. I cannot wait to hear what you think. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Cassy. Welcome, Cassy. I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. We are going to have the best conversation. I already know it.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So I love starting all of my interviews with a fun little icebreaker. So I am curious, especially as an author yourself, what are you reading these days?
Ooh, what a good question. What am I reading these days? Well, you want to know what I read is I actually listen to books. Is that fair? Does that count?
Oh, absolutely. I am a huge Audible girl because that is how I actually read books. So totally counts.
Yeah, good. Same. Okay, let's see. I just finished. What did I just finish? The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. And I feel like I'm probably very late to the game. You haven't read it either. Okay.
I haven't, no.
It took me forever to get through it. And I know some folks really love it. And the author was very meticulous in setting up, it's a fiction book, very meticulous in setting up the plot leading up to how long was this book? It was very long. It was 17 hours. And I really think you could listen to the first hour. And this is so offensive as an author and probably what I'm saying, but I like the last 3 hours, I couldn't put it down. It got really, really good. So I was listening to that and I just started the book, Who is Maud Dixon? I used to be really, really into a bunch of thrillers. One of the best ones I ever read was The Last Mrs. Parrish, if you've ever heard of that one.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that was probably one of the most well-constructed mystery thrillers I've ever read.
So good.
And then all of a sudden, I was pregnant, about to have a baby at the top of a pandemic last spring. And I was like, you know what? I don't need any more fictional, thrilling stories in my life. I feel like I'm living one right now. And so I kind of started to take a break and I'm getting back into it.
I love a good fiction book just to take my mind off of all of the things in life, right?
Yes, exactly. And then geeking out on business books. I don't know if you share this passion, but when you start your own business, and you're running your own business, yes, I'm passionate about food and nutrition, but you also eventually accidentally also become passionate about business. And so I just read the book Rocket Fuel, and I couldn't put it down. And I sound like probably such a geek for saying that I couldn't put a business book down, but it really changed how I thought about my business. So that's a really great one if you happen to be in the small business category.
Oh, I love that. I will definitely add that to my list because I haven't heard of that one. So That's awesome. Oh my gosh, I love that. I love this question because I just get to add new books to my list, which is so fun. So our topic has nothing to do with books, but I love talking about it. So I can't wait to dive into today's topic. So I told you before we officially started recording that I've been following your blog and your recipes since way back. You're actually probably before your first cookbook, and way back when you had the Fed and Fit podcast. So I've been following your stuff for a long time and your recipes are so great. And you've grown and evolved in your work a lot since that first cookbook. And so I would love to have you start by just kind of sharing how Fed and Fit has evolved as your life and as your family has evolved and what you're ultimately passionate about sharing with the world now.
Oh gosh, it has evolved a lot and you've seen it. You've been a front row seat. So when I started Fed and Fit, it was really a personal blog. And can you believe I celebrated 10 years this past summer?
Oh my gosh.
Doing this
Congratulations.
for a while.
That's so exciting.
Thank you. I kind of forgot to celebrate. I was like, oh yeah, there's the date. Such is the life. But when I started Fed and Fit back then, it was really a personal blog to document and share my journey, but mostly with the hopes that it might help somebody else. Like, I feel like I take the extra twisty road to a lesson learned, the very, very windy road there. And I think that, gosh, if I can help someone have a slightly more straightforward path to their adventure in either pursuing health and wellness or even just getting a delicious meal on the table, then what an honor to be able to do that. And so that was the heart with which I started Fed and Fit. I had healed my body after realizing in my early 20s that I had some pretty distinct food intolerances worth navigating and working around. And then I wanted to create recipes that really supported me in that lifestyle. So I didn't feel like I was living without, and I didn't want other people to feel like they were living without. And then I went on to I had readers ask great questions. And I thought, gosh, well, why white rice versus brown rice? That's a great question. Let me go. And then the questions kept piling on. So I went back to school to become a holistic nutritionist so that I could just feel better prepared to dive into literature and to share things like that with folks. And for the record, I'm back. I've veered. Everything tends to like waffle back and forth, but I'm team all rice now. We eat wild rice, brown rice, white rice, you name it. But there's nutritional distinctions between the two. And I think that that's been how my heart has evolved and how I share that kind of content on Fed and Fit is here is what you need to know, here are the differences. And you go choose what's right for you and your body and your life and your family. And that's been so fun to be able to build Fed and Fit, evolve it from those grain-free paleo days to what's really at the heart of it is a no rules wellness destination. Kind of we'll dive into the research and the literature and share kind of some of that stuff. We're not healthcare professionals, but here's some great recipes. If you're asking for an easier or homemade hamburger helper, would love to put that together for you and share about I'm now in the mom life. So here are the top 10 or top 5. I think I have nursing sports bras, that kind of thing, and just give people, hopefully help them again, avoid some of those winds in the road as we all navigate trying to put together a healthy lifestyle. So you don't have to kiss the frogs along the way, and you can I can share some lessons learned.
Oh, I love that so much. And I love that your philosophy is one of, it's not about rules, it's about what works for you. And we'll give you the info and we'll give you the recipes and help to guide you. And then you take it and you run with it. So I love that so much. So I want to talk about the food specifically today. Let's really dive into the food because as everyone who's a listener on the podcast knows that I love food and I'm super into the food. So you are a mom of 2, almost 3 now. So you understand the dinner time struggle. And since this is the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast, we assume that the majority of our listeners are moms in some stage of motherhood. And so even though I'm also a recipe developer, I know that personally dinner time is not always easy. Like just because you create recipes doesn't mean that dinner time is easy. So you were inspired a few years back to start to help people meal prep with your cook once method, which is a really unique meal prep method. So what inspired you really to create this method? And can you just kind of share a little bit about it?
Yes, I would love to. So cook once, the philosophy is really in the name, how do we cook once and have that effort roll forward? And I think that what I have found in my own life, in my own kitchen, as much as I love to cook, and I think you identify with this also, like I love to develop recipes and I love to cook, but building and creating a from scratch dinner every single night was not sustainable for me. I was burnout, food boredom, and I wound up saying, oh, forget it. I can't do this tonight. So let's just order takeout. And then I have food in my pantry and my refrigerator though, that I need to use up. And so it was not a sustainable system. And so I needed to come up with a better way. Getting a delicious dinner on the table should not have to be that difficult. And so cook once, the idea is that we cook a little bit more than we need at once, and we figure out how we can roll that effort forward into future meals.
So can you give me a couple examples of this? So what does this look like in real life? So what does it look like cooking some of those things ahead of time and then rolling them into other meals? Because I love to talk about meal prep and kind of share how I do meal prep. I like to prep ingredients, but you're very specific about like this is the ingredient you're going to prep and this is how you're going to turn it into meals, and you're brilliant at doing that. So could you give us a couple examples of kind of how that looks in real life?
I would love to. Okay, so an example that comes to mind first is, let's say it's Monday and you wanted to have roasted chicken tonight for supper and serve it with some roasted vegetables and maybe even a baked potato. And so what I do, and this is a dinner series out of the book, so obviously I'm borrowing an example, but it's also, this is how I actually cook, which is why developing this book in particular was so not easy. I don't want to say easy, but easier for me because I was like, I'm doing this all the time. So when it comes time to make that dinner, when I put a chicken in the oven, which we would eat tonight for supper, I put another one in. I put an extra chicken in the oven. I don't plan on eating that chicken. We don't need that extra chicken tonight, but the dishes are already dirty. It's not that much effort. I've got room for it on the pan, right? I'm going to season it exactly the same. My hands are already goopy. And so I just put the extra chicken on there, and maybe chickens were on sale at the grocery store, right? And so I was like, I'm going to grab two. They're such a good price. And so I roast the two chickens together with the vegetables and the potatoes. And then 2 days later, when we're ready for chicken again, I'm going to pull out that extra chicken that I already roasted, pull the meat off of the bone, give it a really rough chop, and make a sticky Sesame style Asian inspired dish to toss that chicken in. A honey sesame chicken dish over fluffy white rice is what we have for dinner that night. And it becomes more of an assembly of that dinner versus having to cook it from scratch. And it comes together so quickly. And so it's like I have these spurts of energy where I'm ready to put the raw chicken in the oven and roast it. And I have that in me, but I know that I'm going to be tired in 2 days from now. And I know I'm going to wish I already had a good amount of that prep done. And so that's kind of how it's built. Is chicken's one example. Let's say if it's ground beef is another one. When you're browning ground beef for an enchilada casserole, for example, or a teriyaki veggie stir fry, I say might double the meat. It's not much more work, if much at all, right? To buy 3 pounds of ground beef versus 1.5, to crumble all of that in the pan at once, and then split that already cooked ground beef in half, use half of it tonight for that stir fry with all of the vegetables and the teriyaki sauce. And then the other half we're going to use in a Mexican style dish, an enchilada casserole, and again, it comes together so quickly because you've already done the cooking.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that the examples that you gave are completely different cuisines. So I think
Yes.
sometimes when we hear that, that's why I wanted to ask for examples, because I think sometimes when we hear, well, you cook once and you cook the same thing and then you eat it for multiple days, people are like, but I don't want to eat the same thing for multiple
Yes.
days. But the roast chicken with the vegetables and the potatoes, and then the sticky chicken with like the honey ginger sauce, like that's totally different. You would have no idea that you cooked both of those at once, but that sounds absolutely delicious. And is that recipe in the book? Because I'm going to need to make that for my husband.
It is. Both of those are.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And the same thing with the ground beef. So something that I love to do is anytime, just like you mentioned with the chicken, and actually I did this for both chicken and ground beef. Funny enough, last week we happened to be at Whole Foods. Our Whole Foods is about like 40 minutes away from where we live. So we don't go up there all the time. But we happen to be in the area. So I went to Whole Foods and they had a great sale on like really good quality chicken and like some grass-fed ground beef. And so I didn't buy them out, but I bought as much as would fit in my freezer. So I bought a couple chickens and I bought a bunch. I mean, usually we do a meat delivery, but we just happened to not have one this month because we just moved. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to get all the ground beef and I'm going to get a couple chickens, and those are all in my freezer. So how much easier would it be to pull it out and just to cook those two at once? And like I said, I'm already a big fan of meal prep, but I love the idea of cooking extra more than just what you plan on for this one meal and really transforming it. And I think, yeah, you do such a good job of that. So I love that. So
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. So, one of my favorite things is giving mom's hacks for making meals quicker and easier because I think we all want the hacks because I think that's the biggest struggle as a mom when it comes to dinners is just like you mentioned, like kind of the exhaustion of going, okay, I might have the energy on Monday, but I know by Wednesday I am just going to be tired and not want to cook. And that's where the cook once method starts and comes in. But do you have some really good hacks for making meals come together, getting even quicker, even easier, and just really getting meals on the table faster?
Yes. So I think especially for people who have the cook in the family who has small children maybe running around your feet. What is it about that dinner time hour, that 4:30 to 5:30 is when they need you the most, it seems like, right? I was like, oh, I don't have sizzling grease right here when you really when you really want me to hold you. So what I say is, and what I found to be very effective in my own home is, of course, keeping food safety in mind around small children, but do as much as you can ahead of time. Even little things like if you have a minute at 3 p.m. to get out the rice and pour the dry rice into the saucepan that you're going to cook it in, and then measure the water in a measuring cup and put that right next to it and get the lid out. If my kitchen, for example, has all the child locks on all over it, so holding a baby with also my baby belly and getting the magnet out to get the pot out, it is a whole thing. And it winds up taking so much more time. It's more stressful to do it when all that activity is going on. And so I say, get things out earlier in the day when you have the time and space to do it and nobody's in the kitchen with you and they don't need you right now. Maybe they're really entertained coloring for the next 6 minutes. What can you get out for supper in advance? Get out the cutting board. Already have your vegetables washed and dried. Get out the canned goods, maybe even open the canned goods. And so do the things that you can in advance. And that I've found to be very helpful when it comes time to 5:30, I know it's time to, or 5 o'clock, it's time to put on that rice. It's so nice because now I'm holding the baby, she's 1.5, but I'm holding B and pouring the water in the rice and putting the lid on and turning the heat on. And I can do all of that with one hand very easily, where it was more difficult to get it all out. So that's one big hack. Another one that I have is when you have your cutting board out already, go ahead and chop more stuff. Right. So I'm big on saving dishes. And if you already have the cutting board, you're already going to have to rinse it off and wash it. Same with your knife, might as well keep going. If you know that you're going to, for example, I just made yesterday this, Southwestern turkey casserole, and it calls for chopping 2 bell peppers and half of an onion and a clove of garlic. And so I chopped all of that. But I also know that I'm going to be making some other things today. Like I'm going to make a mango bowl today. So if I have the wherewithal and the time and the space, grab that mango and pull it out and cut it while you've got everything out. Or finish chopping that onion, chop the rest of it. Instead of cutting it in half and saying, I'm going to eat this onion later. You're not going to. You're going to forget about it. You're going to put it in your veggie drawer. It's going to roll to the back. And then when you're cleaning out your refrigerator, you're going to be like, oh, no, shoot. I forgot about that onion and now it's too late. I say, go ahead and run your knife through the rest of it. Give it a really quick chop. You already have it out. Your eyes are already teary, and put it into a little mason jar with a lid on it so that it keeps the onion smell contained. And then store that where you can see it in your refrigerator. Same thing with garlic. Chop your garlic so that when a recipe calls for onion, all you gotta do is take a few scoops out of it or dump the whole thing in the skillet versus get it out the cutting board again, peel the onion, peel the garlic, and give it a chop.
Oh my gosh, I love both of those tips and such simple things that moms can implement right away, or whoever's listening, they can implement right away. And those are those little things that I think we don't think about. We don't think about how hard it is to use a can opener with a baby on our hip. Like it's really hard to try and make that happen. Or just measuring the rice, especially if I know that my little ones are not so little anymore. My 4-year-old is starting to help me in the kitchen. She's still kind of under my feet around dinner time. And my husband's husband's gone a lot. He's a professional sailor, so he's often not around for dinner time. So it's
Oh my
oftentimes like
gosh.
just me and the kiddos. And, my 8-year-old's not so much at my feet anymore, but when they were little, they are both helpers. Like they've always loved to help mom in
Yes.
the kitchen, which I love and appreciate. But like I said, my
So
4-year-old is now
helpful.
like kind of at the point where she can actually help with some things. I can give her something to grate. I can actually kind of
Oh.
give her a task. But up
Mhm.
until recently, the helping it's great to get them into the kitchen and to start, getting comfortable with food, which I want them to. I want them to feel comfortable in the kitchen, but it also might not actually help to make dinner actually come together faster. So doing those
Yes.
little things like getting the rice measured or getting the cans opened or just having things out, I love that tip. And I need to practice that more myself because I definitely don't do that. And even though I try to do some meal prep at the beginning of the week and that's sort of a habit for me, those other things are things that I don't do, like take the cans
Yeah.
out or get the rice ready or things like that. So that's definitely a practice that I know that I can implement. And if I'm not doing that right now, then I know that there's a lot of women listening who do not implement that either. And
Yeah.
I'm totally with you on the chopping when you've got the cutting board out too, because I find that's one of the things that takes the longest when it comes to, and you also don't want to be doing, especially if you have young children running around underneath you, is wielding a knife for a long time. So
Totally.
the least amount of chopping that you can do actually at dinner time, I think the better. So I love that. Unless that is, you actually have the time and you're doing the extra chopping. I should
Right.
clarify there. If you've
Yeah.
got the time, you're doing the extra chopping, do that, and then to prevent it having to do it at dinner time. So I love that. So, G, are there like specific ingredients that you love to keep on hand in your home kitchen or in the Fed and Fit kitchen to make meals that are easy but still flavor packed? I love flavor hacks.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Ingredients that I will always have on hand, spices. I mean, just have some really great spice mixes that you love. I might have a friend, Diane Sanfilippo. She came out with the Balanced Bite spices. And I remember when I was telling her, I was like, I have used up my entire jar of super garlic, for example. And she's like, what a compliment. Because as a recipe developer, I'm really used when it comes to chili spices, I still mix my own in real time. Right. Because I just know exactly how much of everything to throw in. And I really like my own mix. But she was like, what a compliment that you would use my spice blend, especially as a food person. And I think that it's just a life hack. I think everybody needs it, whether you're a recipe developer or not. And so having some really great spice blends on hand so that when you're ready to press the super duper easy button on supper and just pan sear some chicken thighs and call it a day, you have that blend ready. You know that it's already got a nice combination of flavors and I usually add a little bit extra salt, but something like that, I think is a really great hack. I always like to have, I'm actually in my pantry right now, here at the office, looking over at my shelf. And a couple other things that I really like to always have on hand are going to be things like ghee. I cook with butter a lot. Butter is probably my favorite cooking fat. I also really like extra virgin olive oil, but I always have ghee on hand because ghee has such a high smoke point. Of the fats that have a high smoke point between ghee and avocado oil, I vastly prefer ghee over avocado oil for flavor and other reasons. And I find myself reaching for it when I know that I want to put some really hot heat on something and get a nice crust or a nice sear for like you're saying, that extra flavor. And because it has such a high smoke point, I think it's around 500 degrees. You can get away with that with a jar of ghee. And so that's just always so easy and fun. And it's shelf stable. So it makes it really convenient. So things like that. And then, you know, I would not have thought that I would ever say these words, but I really like to have fish sauce and things like that on hand. So we lean on a lot of Asian inspired flavors in my home and also in my work. And fish sauce is one of those ingredients that can be intimidating to people because you're like, what is this? If you've never cooked with it before, but if you've ever thought, wow, what is this deliciousness in this, you know, dish that I've been eating from maybe a favorite restaurant, there's a really good chance there's a good amount of fish sauce in there. And so things like that I can always up the flavor of something. Fish sauce, tamari. I happen to be gluten-free, and so tamari instead of soy sauce, for example. And then I had one more. What was it that, oh, lemons and limes, always fresh lemon juice and lime juice. I think that sometimes, so it's a fun little nutrition hack for you, but sometimes when you're eating food and sometimes food, I'm a big believer in using plenty of really good, healthy salt. But sometimes if we think that our food needs more salt, it could be actually that our taste buds are craving some acid.
Mm-hmm.
And so before you grab the salt and sprinkle that on there, maybe grab a lemon wedge or a lime wedge, depending on the food, and give it a squeeze and see if that scratches the itch. There's a really good chance it does. And having fresh lemon and lime, because vitamin C is such, not to get too geeky here, but vitamin C is such a fragile vitamin. It can denature really quickly under heat. Squeezing it on fresh at the very end of a meal is also going to ensure that you're getting a little bit of a fun little nutrient boost.
Oh, I love that. And I'm here to geek out on all the nutrition stuff too. So I love that. And you know what? That's funny what you mentioned, the adding the citrus at the end instead of salt. That is something that I learned in Italy. So I spent a summer in Italy way back in college. And before I even learned to cook, they showed us that you put not too much salt, a little bit of lemon, a little bit of lemon. I'm not going to try and do an Italian accent because I certainly cannot do it. But like squeeze of lemon, like right at the end of any sort of like their soups, like a minestrone or something like that. You did a little bit of lemon juice at the end. And yeah, it just makes the flavor pop and you might not even need any of that extra salt. So I love that. I love all of those tips and all of those kind of flavor hacks too. I'm a big fan of spice blends in my house too, because that's another one of those things that is such a time saver, right? Not having to measure out a bunch of different spices, because I am all about spices, all about flavors. And so yeah, if you don't have to measure out like 16 different spices, you can just kind of have that in your cabinet. I know that I make a homemade taco seasoning and that is like my go-to.
Yes.
And I will make it for friends and family and kind of give it to them as a little gift or something, and they'll come back and they'll be like, can I get some more of that? I was like, I will make you some more, but you can also get the recipe and you can do it yourself and keep it and have it on hand. They're like, oh, okay. And it's just, a little bit healthier than what you would get in the packet.
Yes.
But yeah, having those spice blends on hand is so huge. Now, do you have a chili or the chili mix in your book that people can get that blend since you love it so much?
Oh, I do. So there's actually the chili recipe. I have the book right here. The chili recipe in the vegetarian chapter of all chapters is actually probably my favorite chili in the entire world. And if you wanted to add some beef to it or some ground pork or something like that, you could definitely do it. I mean, it doesn't have to be either one of those. It could be any of them. Anyways, it is really delicious. Okay, this vegetarian chili, it's on page 235 if you get the book, Dinner Series number 50. And it is so delicious, pretty robust, little smoky, just really, really good. And this is, measuring out my chili, I'm sure you might feel this way. I actually don't measure much in the kitchen when I'm cooking for myself. Like I get out the jars and it's like, oh, little this, a little of that. But when I'm cooking for work and developing a recipe, of course, I have to measure it. And I feel like this is the best possible blend I could come up with for you.
Mm-hmm. I love that, especially as we're coming into the fall. Chili is one of my absolute favorites. So we've mentioned your book a couple times. So this is actually your third book. Your last one was Cook Once, Eat All Week, and that is kind of all meals throughout the week. But this new book that you're actually coming out with next week as we're recording, but it'll be, I think, last week once this actually comes out. So it will be out by the time my listeners are listening to this. It's all about dinners and all about dinner time, which is what we've been focusing on because I think that is the hardest meal of the day for most of us, especially those of us who are busy moms. So where do you get the inspiration for your recipes? I love hearing other recipe developers, bloggers, authors. Where do you get the inspiration for the recipes in your books?
Oh gosh. I mean, it's a combination of what I think would be really delicious, what I know readers have asked for. So for example, I'm looking at this page and these are enchilada stuffed zucchini boats is the pairing for this vegetarian chili with the cornbread. And folks would write in and say, what do I do with all these zucchinis? How do I make use of these and how do I cook them in a way that's not just the same? And so part of it is also like a lot of reader requests and reader inspiration. And then thinking about I mean, really, I take things that I like, things folks are asking for, and then I sit down. It's a really fun part of the process is I open up Pinterest and I just start searching for things and see what dishes are kind of out there. I look at some of my favorite menus from restaurants that I've really loved and just start to piece together these concepts and these approaches and these ideas of dishes that I really think sound delicious and how I can make them fed and fit style, which means that they're going to be very straightforward, very easy to follow recipes, maximum flavor, but minimal time to pull it off.
I love that. I love all of those things about your recipes. So you mentioned these, you kind of start out with, what do I want to make? What do I want to eat? So what are your family's favorite recipes from your new book?
Oh gosh, my family really loves. Ooh, there's a minestrone soup in here that my family really, really loves. And it is when serving really small kids, one day soon, maybe I can just put a bowl of soup in front of them and they'll be happy. But right now, it's like a bowl of soup is kind of like a mystery, right? It's a little intimidating. My husband and I might like the bowl of minestrone soup with like a piece of crusty bread on the side. But I like meals like that because what I do is I just fish out the beans and the green beans and the pasta and the meatballs are in this minestrone soup, and the vegetables and the tomatoes. And I'm able to kind of give it to them in a deconstructed format. And they love it. They love the flavor. And then after they've gobbled all of that up, they're like, what do you have in that bowl over there, Mama? And then they want to eat a little bit more. And so I will say, like, every recipe in this book I developed through the lens of how do we make these family friendly so that no matter the tastes in your kitchen or the dietary restrictions or the dietary needs, you feel like there's a place for you here.
Yeah, I love that about your book too. I love that there's a whole vegetarian section and there is just a huge variety of different cuisines and different flavors. I love that because I'm all about family-friendly recipes because I'm a huge foodie and I love going to restaurants and trying delicious new recipes. But the amount of times that I actually recreate any of those, I've had people reach out to me and say, "Can you recreate this recipe that I ate at this restaurant?" And I'm like, probably, but like, would you actually spend the time to make it? Because I used to be a personal chef actually years ago, and a lot of the recipes that I made my clients when I was a personal chef, I don't ever share because they just take
Yeah.
too long and they're not things that we
Yes.
would normally make. And every once in a while, I'll make one of them for my husband as like an at-home date night. But like the kids
Mm.
aren't going to wait around for dinner to be cooked in, an hour and a half. They're not there for that. So I love that your recipes are are family friendly. And I love that you mentioned that you pick out the different pieces of the soup for your kids because I'm like, oh, good, it's not just me. I have one kiddo, my older daughter. She's always been a super, super great eater and she will try pretty much anything. She has some preferences, obviously, like we're all humans. We all have different flavor preferences.
Yeah.
But other than that, like she will try it at least. And most of the time, and she's very honest too. So she'll tell me, that one wasn't that great, mommy. I'm like, well, I liked it, but, but my younger
She's
daughter,
honest.
yeah, she is. She's honest. So she's probably like my best critic too. Cause I'm like, oh, she didn't like it. Maybe I need to, maybe I need to go back to the drawing board. So she is, but my younger daughter, who's almost 4, she's, a lot more selective and she doesn't like mixed meals. She doesn't like things that are touching. And so
Mhm.
it's always kind of helpful to have things that are family friendly too, where we can pick things out a little bit. But I love that all the recipes in your book are kind of made with the family in mind, going, okay, this is something hopefully the whole family will enjoy. And it's with this super, super easy method of cooking things once and eating it more than once. So I love that. So, okay, you have some great tips in your book about how to reheat the foods you make ahead. And this is a question I know people are going to ask because we're talking about cooking once and eating more than once. So, can you give some of those tips of how do we actually reheat these foods? How do we remake these foods? Because I know sometimes it can be like, okay, you cooked 2 whole chickens. How am I going to reheat that second chicken? I know you mentioned shredding it and then. So what are some of your tips for that?
Yes, such a great question. I think that it depends on the protein, which is why there's so many variations in here and a lot of guidance. But to give you a couple quick tips, I think that for animal protein, for example, it's not going to be the same. the second time you reheat it, right? And I would just know that going in. Shredded chicken and shredded proteins and ground proteins, those are going to be pretty similar in terms of texture and meal experience when you reheat them. But for the rest of things like a roasted chicken or pork tenderloin and things that are chopped, sliced, or cubed, things like that, they're going to be different in terms of texture. The roasted chicken, for example, it's not going to be quite as juicy as it was coming out of the oven fresh. And so know that going in, and know that instead of thinking this is going to be the same dish reheated, remember you're making something different, right? This is going to be something different, and that can be really good. It can be good in its own category. And so trying to separate how you're going to compare if the protein matched up, I think letting that go is really important, and then treating it differently as such. So for example, we're making one today that starts off as this island style pork tenderloin. And so I'm going to pan sear the pork tenderloin and then stick it in the oven and roast it until it's perfectly delicious, and then slice it and serve it fresh, half of the pork. And then the other half gets stored for later. But fresh sliced pork tenderloin is going to be different from reheated. And so what I'm going to do with the reheated one is cut it into cubes, pull out my skillet, toss it in some new seasonings, and pan sear it until it's crispy. It's a totally different treatment style of that protein. Same thing for that chicken, that roasted chicken. I'm going to take the breast meat, give it a light chop, and then pan sear it until it's a little crispy in some butter or some ghee, right? Give it a totally different treatment. And so I think that that's something to think about, is how can you pan sear, pan fry, lean into those kinds of things, these second day or third day, whenever it is you're getting around to it, proteins. And then also leaning on the skillets or putting things in sauces, covering them in spices, things like that are really going to help transform the dish. And so shredded chicken or shredded proteins and ground proteins are really great in soups. I think it's a really great application for reheated. They're really great in casseroles. So dishes where you have lots of sauce, lots of layers. You're not so much worried about the perfect texture of like a medium rare steak, right? That's not the point of this meal. The point of this meal is to have this really yummy sauce and spice and flavor around that ground protein. And so leaning into applications like that.
I like that. I like just having the mindset of this isn't going to be the same, so let's make it different. So let's actually make it with a different preparation and just make it delicious in a different way.
Yes.
So something that I'm curious about, because I get asked this a lot too, and I know we all have kind of different answers, but so how many times would you use that one, say, protein you make? So if you make the roast chicken, you make the 2 roast chickens, how many different meals are you going to make with that roast chicken? Is it just one, or can you do 2 or 3? Kind of how does that work?
In Cook Once Dinner Fix, I have everything in pairs. And so they're designed originally and it's really meant to just give you a really simple formula that you can expand if you want. So I've designed it so that you get 2 meals out of that chicken. And hopefully what you're able to do is meal plan from this book and grab a protein from a different chapter and alternate them throughout your week. So you're getting some nutrient variety in your week. But I also know that every once in a while, you're going to find maybe the pork shoulder in the book calls for a 4 to 5 pound pork shoulder. And you're like, well, I've got an 8-pound pork shoulder. So what am I going to do with this? And I say, when you get to that point, you have a whole bunch of shredded pork, way more than you need for those 2 meals. Go find another shredded pork dinner in here that you can use, or freeze intentionally ahead of time, well in advance, the rest of that shredded pork already cooked. Freeze it into a container or a package that you know is going to be enough for one meal for you and your family. Label it so that, because if you freeze it in a larger batch or a larger quantity, the odds of you actually using it are probably less than if you freeze it in, like, for example, a 1 pound use would be great for my house. Then I know I can just plop that into a skillet and turn it into a chili really quickly.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, freezing in those smaller quantities that are enough for your family because you know how much your family eats. And so going, okay, I'm gonna freeze this in 1 pound or 2 pounds, whatever it is, versus yeah, having an extra 6 pounds of shredded pork in your freezer that then you have to defrost the whole thing and then you end up wasting half of it. So yeah,
Yes.
no, I like that. I like that a lot. So typically kind of like 2 meals, maybe three if you end up having extra protein on hand. I think that helps with boredom too, right? Going, okay, I'm eating the same thing throughout like all week long. It's not that we're cooking one protein and then we are eating shredded chicken every single day that week. It's like, okay, we're eating
Yes.
shredded chicken for a couple days and then we're going to eat some ground beef and then maybe we'll do pork tenderloin and well, that's 6 meals right there. So that's
Yep.
awesome. I love that. So do you recommend doing kind of some prep at the beginning of the week or do you recommend kind of doing the prep for one meal? I know it's going to be different with everyone, but what is the method in terms of that? Is it like, okay, you prep on a Sunday, or do you prep Monday for these 2 meals and then Wednesday for these 2 meals? How do you recommend that?
That's a really great question. It depends on your style. So the way that the book is broken up, it's written so that you do not have to have a prep day if you don't want one,
Hmm.
right? So you prep for meal two while you're making meal one is the way that it's designed. But if you are, and I know you are somebody who likes to do a little bit of prep in advance, I've got tips and call outs of things that you can do in advance. And so
Hmm.
things like if it is shredded, if it's a shredded protein or a ground protein, you can cook those the day ahead, right? So then it's you really are just assembling day of for both of those meals, chopping all of your vegetables, making your sauces, making spice blends, things like that. So it's just a quick dump and go. But it's definitely not required. And so if you were weaving these, let's say 2 dinner series together to get 4 meals this week, I would personally, how I use the book is I prep on a Monday for my Wednesday meal, and then I prep on a Tuesday for my Thursday meal.
Mm. Oh, I like that. So there is a ton of variety there. So you're not even eating the same protein kind of 2 days in a row. Oh,
Yes.
I like that. I like that a lot. I love that you have that option too. Because, yeah, like I mentioned, I am someone who likes to do a little, usually, but just about an hour of prep on a
Mhm.
Sunday just to kind of get me through the week. But there are weeks that doesn't happen. And even though I talk about meal prep all the time, and it's one of those of like my secret weapons to actually getting meals on the table, it sometimes doesn't happen for me either. So I love that you already have that laid out in the book. You're like, you are going to be you're going to be prepping these two all together. So you've already got 2 meals covered. So I love that. And the recipes look absolutely delicious. I'm so excited to start cooking them. Like I mentioned, the only reason I think I got your book last week, I was very blessed to get an advanced copy and I wanted to start cooking in it. But the only reason I haven't is because we've been moving. Otherwise, I would have. So next week, I'm going to start cooking from your cookbook and I can't wait. And so I'm sure that my listeners who are listening are going to want to grab a copy of your book. So can you just kind of share with my listeners, anyone who doesn't already know you, which I'm sure many of them already do. But where can they get your book? Where can they connect with you?
Yes, the book is available really everywhere books can be found. And so go find your favorite local shop. And if they don't have it, I'm sure that they can get it. You can ask for it. And then you can also find it on online, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all of those places are going to carry it. And then you can find me and the rest of my work over at fedandfit.com. We've got over, I think, almost 1,200 recipes there, free recipes for you and wellness articles. And then I'm probably the most active on social media over on Instagram. And the page is Fed and Fit. And if you like this idea, but you're just trying, it's hard to picture how this actually works. And I know that that can be challenging. I have a lot of demos there waiting for you. I've been cooking my little heart out. And so you can find those saved to a highlight and hopefully that'll help you figure out if this would be the right fit for your family.
Oh, I love that. So I have three fun little rapid fire questions that I love to ask at the very end to all of my guests. And since you love cooking and eating as much as I do, I'm very excited about these answers. So my first one is, what have you been loving to cook lately? Since you've been saying that you are cooking your heart out.
Oh, I am cooking my heart out. Man, you know what I missed making are briskets. I made a lot of briskets developing this book, really trying to come up with the most simple possible version of making a brisket because it can be so intimidating. And some recipes can be a little fussy. And I wanted to make sure that these were really simple. And then I took a break because I was like, I've had enough brisket when we figured out the book. And I'm just so glad to be cooking from it again because they're delicious.
Brisket is so good. I love that. So then what have you been loving to eat lately?
Loving to eat lately. You know what I've got waiting outside in the kitchen right now is a oh gosh. So my favorite, maybe this is going to sound weird. I don't know. For breakfast, I'm going to have a very late lunchy breakfast today, is going to be plantains. So I get these sweet plantains from the freezer section. And so they're already ripe. They're so delicious. And I cook those up very simply in some butter with some eggs, with some fresh berries, some crumbled sausage, some sort of cheese, and cilantro on top. And it is just like the breakfast of my dreams.
Oh my gosh, that sounds delicious. Okay, I need to know more about these plantains. Are they like sliced in the freezer section?
Oh my gosh, they're going to change your life. Maybe that's dramatic, but I felt like they changed
I
mine.
love plantains, so I would love to know.
And when you buy plantains, you're like, okay, great, we'll have these in 2 weeks when
Yes,
they're ready,
exactly.
because they're not ready yet. They are already sweet. They're peeled and they're in like large chunks. And it's Goya is the
Oh,
brand.
yes, yeah.
Goya. And they come usually 3 to 4 to a container. And they're this ingredient, it's just plantains is the ingredient.
Oh my gosh.
They're already pre-roasted, and so you just have to reheat them. They're fabulous.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna go find those at the grocery store this weekend. That is awesome. I love it. Oh my gosh. Okay, so now that I'm all like excited about food, my last and final question, because this is the Healthy Balance Mama podcast, and we like to promote balance in every area, food, life, otherwise. So what does balance look like to you in this season?
Oh gosh, balance to me looks like in this season. Oh man, a mentor of mine told me this or said this years ago now is when I first heard it. But when talking about being a mom and running a business, being a wife, having friends, a daughter, and all of these other things that we have going on in our life, is there's this constant feeling or pressure of wanting to hustle to do well in all of those categories at all the time. And there's this temptation we can slip into where we're like, oh gosh, what plate am I dropping right now? And that's such a stressful feeling. And it can lead to this feeling of rush and hurry to try to get to the next thing or do it all at once. And what she said was, also as a working mother, was you can have it all, but you cannot have it all on the same day. And it was so freeing to think about it that way. And when I think about nutrition, I think about it that way. I think like when I'm weaving together dinners, not to make it sound so trite, but when I'm weaving together dinner series, I'm going to have 2 seafood meals this week and 2 meals from beef. Like I'm able to, yes, today I had these nutrients, and it's not all the nutrients I need, but I've got these ones. But by the end of the week, I've touched on probably way, way more than I thought I did in any given day. Mm-hmm. And the same is true for how I strike that kind of balance in my life, is understanding that it's not so much about what I'm able to excel at every single day, because some days I'm crushing it at work, and some days I'm crushing it at home, and some days I'm crushing it as a daughter and a friend and a spouse. But it's not all the time, all the days, but at the end of the week, and maybe sometimes at the end of the month, I know that I was able to check all of those boxes and give it my full attention. And then when I'm there, my last part of the question, and so it's supposed to be rapid fire, but my last part of this answer is when I'm someplace, I'm fully present. I'm fully there. And that's also been something that's been really important to me as someone who likes to multitask and likes to do a little of this and a little of that at the same time. I find that I'm not able to really check the box that I think I'm checking. Children will make this very clear and apparent to you. But losing my phone on a Saturday and being like, wow, I haven't seen my phone since 7 a.m. and it's 3:30. Like what a gift that is to your family to be able to just be that present with them. And so, trying to really, wherever I am, be fully there.
I love that so much. And what a perfect way to end our conversation today. Because I think in our conversation, we helped the moms listening or whoever is listening, really help them to find more balance with their meals, with dinner time, and trying to make it less stressful. And that is a part of life, right? And so being present in everything but not all the time. Not everything all the time. You said it much more beautifully than I just repeated. Oh my gosh, Cassy, this was so much fun to chat with you about this. I cannot wait to cook from your cookbook. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and chatting with me and my listeners. I know I am so grateful for the time, and I know that they are going to want to cook these recipes too.
Thank you so much for having me, Kristin. This was a joy.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthy Balance Mama podcast. If you loved it, would you take a screenshot and share it with a friend over on Instagram and tag me in it? It helps me so much to know what you love and are taking away from each episode. If you really loved it, would you hop over to iTunes and give me a star rating and review? Every rating and review helps this podcast be seen and heard by more women who need to hear the message of balance and wellness without deprivation. It's the best free gift you could give me. And as a reminder, the information and opinions on this podcast are meant for education and inspiration only and are not to be taken as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please consult with a trusted practitioner before making any changes. Have a beautiful day, friend, and I'll see you in the next episode.